For some people, a visit to the dentist, a poke in the eye with a sharp stick, or perhaps watching paint dry is a far more pleasurable experience than completing their tax return. It does not have to be that way. Hi folks, my name is Mahmood. I'm an accountant, an educator and mentor and proud author of the book, I Hate Numbers. I Hate Numbers is a book that's aimed for the self-employed, for businesses, for SMEs, that helps them show and guide a path to running their own business, as well as talk about the power of numbers, budgeting, planning, and what goes on between your ears. Music to my ears. Let's crack on with the video. Now, in this week's video, I'm going to show you by a worked example the composition and the content of the self-employed short pages. The self-employed short pages, by the way, is aimed for those individuals who don't trade as companies, but trade as sole traders, self-employed. And the short pages are used where your annual sales are less than £85,000 a year. 85,000, by the way, folks, is the level of the VAT threshold. If you started partway during the year, by the way, and you've started maybe 6 months into your year, and your value of the work you've done is 50,000, not your profits, but the value of your turnover, then you have to complete the longer form, because on an annual basis, that's 100 grand a year. Follow me, and let's go and have a look at what that return actually looks like. You're now nearly at the final stages of submitting the tax return. What we need to do now is to complete what's called the self-employed short pages. In the top part, we've entered our name, or it's going to be pre-populated if you've been filing before. Unique tax reference, your 10-digit number that identifies you, is essential information to go into the return. The next section refers to business details, so it's mostly text and narrative information. So what is it your business does? Put that in box 1. Put your current postcode of your business address. And if it's changed in the last 12 months, it's really important that you indicate that by marking it so in box 3. Also enter that in any other information. We don't want HMRC to send correspondence to an address you no longer have connections with. Box 4, if you're a foster carer, which you can be as well as being self-employed, put that into the box. Remember, each of these pages is done for each distinct business that you run as a self-employed individual. In this particular example, we're assuming an ongoing business is carrying on trading, it has been for a few years, so therefore there's no need to enter anything into boxes 5 or boxes 6. If your business has indeed started partway during the tax year, then enter the date in box 5, and if you've ceased trading, enter that information into box 6, and that should take you out the tax system for the following year if you are no longer self-employed and you perhaps are going into PAYE. Box 7, indicate the date that your accounts are made up to. And importantly, if we look at box 8, there are 2 ways that HMRC will expect you to provide information to them as a self-employed business. Either do it on what's called traditional accounting. It is a method we tend to use for all of our clients, but you can, if you wish to, if your business affairs are relatively straightforward, if they're quite simple, then you can use what's called the cash basis. And that's effectively just looking at the money, the cash that physically comes in one year and the expenses that go out. The difference is effectively your cash profits. If your business is complex, you've got levels of inventory, you're giving customers time to pay their bills, and also if potentially you might need to get finance for your business, then a cash basis may not be suitable. So tread carefully, seek the advice of an accountant before you decide what to do. In this example, as I've said, we're going to be using the traditional basis, so we're not going to mark. Now, box 9. Now, 21-22 also covered a period where COVID, certainly in terms of financial support from HMRC, was evident. Box 9 is the turnover. That's the value of the goods and services that you've sold to your customers. Do not include any of the self-employed grants. More of that in a few moments. And if you've got any other grants that you've received, they go into box 10. So box 9 is the turnover, excluding VAT, that goes into that section. Now, box 10, if during 21-22 you have perhaps a property-based business and you've received lockdown grants, then that goes into box 10. If you've employed staff and you've received the job retention scheme, furlough grant as we commonly call it, that also goes into box 10. Box 10.1, if you have very minimal expenses, not exceeding £1,000, then you can claim a flat rate £1,000 trading income allowance. In this example, we're going to be looking at the trader has got more than £1,000 worth of expenses and therefore would not be advised to claim.
Now in the bottom section, we're now going to enter the expenses of our business. Now there are two options. You can, if you wish, just summarise all the business expenses and put them into box 20. My preference, my approach always is to break down and make a full disclosure. And that way it minimises HMRC asking questions. If they see an unusual amount, they think it's quite high compared to your turnover, it just prevents an inquiry and a conversation. So for me, disclosure and breaking down what you're claiming for is far more preferable than putting up one single lump figure. However, the option is yours. We're now going to look at boxes 11 up to 19. 20 is just the aggregate, the total of boxes 11 to 19. Now compared to the full pages, there's less information to include in terms of number of boxes, it's less detailed, but the principles of what we include are essentially the same. Ultimately, the figures that go into boxes 11 to 19 must be business expenses. So if there's any personal usage in those expenses, make sure you've disregarded them. Again, the other choice you need to bear in mind is, are you claiming what's called simplified expenses, or are you claiming the actual cost? Now, box 11 includes materials purchased, so if you're a manufacturer or a retailer, this is likely to apply to you, and it's adjustments for any opening and closing stock or inventory, if we're going to give it an international term. Box 12, in this example, I'm using the simplified, so I'm claiming a mileage rate. So all those expenses there are in relation to using my vehicle for business purposes. And that is the equivalent claim that I'm making on the level of business miles that I've travelled. Remember, 45 pence for each business mile up to 10,000, 25 pence a mile thereafter. Now, box 13, wages, salaries and other staff costs. You can employ people, you can have also freelance staff, direct labour. That goes into box 13. When it comes to box 14, if you work from home, you can claim, which I have done in this example, a £26 per month, working 101 plus hours per month on average. As we go through box 15, I've got no repairs or maintenance on any equipment I've got, or box 16, I've got a figure in relation to accountancy, some bookkeeping fees that I've paid out for, something that's helped me put these figures together. And in box 17 is the bank interest and credit card. Now, if you're going to put anything in box 17 as a self-employed individual, make sure it's only the business element. HMRC typically do not allow interest to be deducted or bank charges if it's a mixed account where you use it for personal and for business use. It becomes very difficult to attribute those charges to the business dimension only. So again, recommended, make sure you have a separate bank account for your business. Therefore, it's box 18 is a made up of a number of things. So those will be things like telephony costs, paper, stationery, IT software that you might have, and remember, it's only the business dimension. So if you include mobile phone bills in there, make sure you eliminate any private usage. And box 19 is typically anything that doesn't go into the other boxes above. Those will include things like advertising. Now, entertaining is not allowed, so if you schmooze and you keep a client happy, you take suppliers out to lunch, that's perfectly acceptable business practice, but it's not allowed by HMRC. If you do have staff and you have your annual Christmas dinner, your summer barbecue or equivalent, then you can claim that as a business expense. Then when we top them all up, that comes to the grand total of 4472. Now as we carry it forward in box 21, that's the profit that we've made. Now we have one more thing to take into account, and we have to take into account any asset purchases. So during the course of the year, I purchased a piece of equipment for my business. The value of that is £750. And I'm entitled to claim 100% of the cost of that item. If you buy something like a PC or perhaps a phone handset, you can similarly claim 100% of the cost, but you must eliminate the private usage. Now lastly, remember, if this is 21-22, it's likely you would have received a self-employed grant. Now there are 5 grants in total that were paid out. 2 of those would have been normally paid out in 21-22. Now check your bank statements, check your tax accounts to see what you received, and make sure you include it. So that goes into box 27.1, and unfortunately is subject to tax and national insurance. Now we have here then the profit on which we're going to pay tax, standing at 25,278. Now lastly, it's then what do we do? Now we're assuming there's no losses in this business from last year. If there are, we can utilise them if we haven't used them elsewhere. Now, one thing to note here when it comes to national insurance. National insurance, you're exempt for class 4 if you're under the age of 16 or you're at state retirement age. Box 36, Now in this case, we are due to pay Class 2. So national insurance is effectively made up of two numbers, Class 2 and Class 4. If your profits are actually below 6515 for the year, then you can choose not to pay it. My recommendation would be, as a default, is to voluntarily pay your Class 2 national insurance, because that goes towards your state pension contribution. We're now coming to the last section, and that's the amount that you owe HMRC. Now typically this will be made up of the income tax on the profits from your business, plus the national insurance, plus what's called a payment on account. Link in the notes, folks, to details about what payments on account are and national insurance contributions. But as a heads up, we've got just over £4,100 odd pounds to pay for that particular year, including £1,400 odd pounds worth of Class 4 national insurance, our Class 2 national insurance of £158.60. We've assumed in this example no student loan that is due. If you do have a student loan, make sure you mark the box. Again, HMRC have these records, by the way, so not including it, hoping to get away with it, will not work. Now folks, the final thing to do, once you're happy with that, you've checked it, you're comfortable with the figures you've got in there, you've got evidence to back up what you've included, press the button, the return gets submitted, and then the last stages are the payment of that tax. I hope you found this video useful. I'd love it if you could give me some feedback, subscribe to the channel and share it with those who you feel will benefit. And until next time folks, happy tax returning.